Marcus Schmidt from the Ohio Sleep Medicine Institute. I am actually also a board member on the Carpe Diem String Quartet, and I've known these guys for many years, actually. And it is a pleasure to be here tonight and to talk about a subject dear to my heart, which is sleep and dreams. But before I do, I just want to thank the members of the Goodwill Families and Friends Network for their volunteering tonight, for checking in. It's very helpful to have them with us here tonight. I want to give you a little background about this project that the Carpe Diem String Quartet, with myself at the Ohio State Medicine Institute, that we have embarked upon. Korine Fujiwara wrote a piece about sleep, and this piece is called Morpheus Rides. And to do so, she actually was involved in coming to the clinic, and I'm going to share some of that with you, to record her sleep and to use her sleep as a sort of template, if you will, a piece to inspire her for the score to write this piece about sleep and dreams. Before I get into that, I want to share just some basic ideas and concepts with you, because sleep is a field that is, at least in medicine, is a very relatively new field. It's only been around since probably the mid-70s in terms of sleep medicine. The term sleep medicine did not even exist until about 1980 or maybe 85, just to give you some perspective on how new this is. And one of the issues about sleep is that for thousands of years, and particularly in the written history, sleep has been viewed or thought of as a time of death, a time when nothing occurs, all right? The absence of activity. And why would you, as a scientist, want to study something that resembles death, all right? So for many, many hundreds of years, sleep was ignored. It was really not even addressed in physiology textbooks as to what goes on in sleep, besides just an absence of wakefulness. So from a historical perspective, in this sleep as a time of death, you can see that in writing through literature, such as Death's Brother Sleep from Virgil. Shake off this downy sleep, death's counterfeit, and look on death itself from Shakespeare. Sleep, those little slices of death, how I loathe them, attributed to Edgar Allan Poe. And death was a friend, and sleep was death's brother from John Steinbeck. And finally from Gandhi, each night when I go to sleep, I die. And the next morning, when I wake up, I am reborn. But this gives you some perspective as to how sleep was viewed throughout art and literature, and even in paintings. This is Sleep and his half-brother Death, unfortunately got cut off here at the bottom, done by John Waterhouse in 1874. So why do we sleep? You know, it's 1/3 of our lives. Virtually every species that we know of sleeps, from insects to fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. But what we know is that sleep is actually a process. It is not a passive process. We are using energy when we sleep. We're doing many vital functions in sleep, such as memory consolidation, immune function, cell membrane repair, growth of new neurons in the brain, just to give you some example. So we are actually hard at work when we're sleeping. It is not really the time of rest or complete inactivity as we may think. And we know that deprivation of sleep, systematically across species, leads to cognitive impairment, cellular stress, and eventually, if sleep is deprived long enough, will lead to death. So we understand that sleep has an absolute vital purpose without which we cannot survive. But in spite of that, the knowledge and all this that we've come to understand about sleep over the last 60 years in terms of science of sleep, the primary function of sleep remains without consensus as to why we actually sleep. That's remarkable when you think about it. 1/3 of our life. It is the last remaining common biological phenomenon, behavior, if you will, across species that we do not understand really why we have to sleep to perform many of these functions that happen in sleep. Why not do them in quiet wakefulness, for example? So, however, sleep is as necessary as the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the food we eat to survive and function. So this collaboration with Korine Fujiwara, this is Korine, who you know very well, who was at my sleep lab, hooked up with the electrodes to monitor her breathing, monitor her brainwave activity, and she had a nightly sleep lab. And this is her hypnogram. This is when we score the sleep studies. This shows us what her sleep looks like. And what you see typically in sleep is that you go through several stages from wake to stage 1 sleep, which is this little blip here, into more stable sleep, stage 2, and some deep slow wave sleep, which is called stage 3. But what you see here is organization, and you can get an appreciation of just how highly organized sleep actually is. And I'm happy to say that Korine's sleep looks very healthy and organized. You can see these are 4 dream periods that we call rapid eye movement REM sleep. In dream sleep, we are paralyzed. Nothing in our body can move except the diaphragm to breathe and the eye movements, what we call rapid eye movements. And this dream sleep occurs at a very highly predictable cycle. And she had 4 cycles of dream sleep. These occur typically every 90 minutes, and they last typically about 20-25 minutes in duration. We can record activity from the brain. This just shows you, this is Korine, and this is her actual physiological recording. The top 2 channels are the eye movements. This purple channel is the chin EMG to monitor muscle tone of the chin. And she has 4 channels to record her EEG, or electroencephalographic activity. That's how we know if she's sleeping or awake, her brainwave activity. And we got an EKG there as well. And in wakefulness, you see there's a lot of muscle tone. There's a chin that she's maybe chewing or whatever she's doing. There's some eye movements, some fast eye movements, and some activity in the EEG that tells us this is awake. It's very high frequency, or a low voltage, fast frequency activity. When you go to sleep, on the other hand, you see this nice slowing of the EEG. We call this theta activity here. This is theta activity. And that tells us she's asleep. We see some nice slow rolling eye movements that are typical of this drowsy state. And then we move into a stage 2 sleep. And here, what typifies stage 2 are these K complexes that we call them, and spindle activities, burst activity that we find in the cortex. So what Korine did is she was inspired by these waveforms, and she wanted to write a piece that actually represented with music some of these waveforms that she sees, or we were seeing from her sleep. And this just to give you a perspective from the score, if you will, from stage 2 non-REM sleep, which is very different from this deep slow wave sleep. As you can see, these very high amplitude slow waves in the cortex that we see when we are in the deepest part of sleep. And that's the musical notes, if you will, that represent this deep slow wave sleep. And then finally, the rapid eye movement REM sleep. These fast, rapid eye movements that we see associated with this muscle atonia. The muscle tone just goes away. The person is completely paralyzed, cannot move, all right? And then the EEG activity looks somewhat like a wake, but it is a little different. And here is the score of rapid eye movement, REM sleep. And you're going to see throughout the piece, I'm going to have a slideshow that's going to be going, and I'm going to show you at times where in the score we are with respect to the piece. So you get a perspective as to how this musical piece correlates with the music. And before I go on to let's get started, I just want to show you what rapid eye movement sleep looks like. This is dream sleep in an infant. And you can see these muscle twitches, these facial expressions, and you get an appreciation of just how active REM sleep is. You see the same type of thing in other species. This is a dog in dream sleep. And I'm sure any of you who've have a dog have seen some similar type of activity. Just to show you that it's not just in dogs and humans, here's a ferret doing exactly the same thing, these little twitches that are occurring. And finally, in rapid eye movements, showing a video of an adult human when they are in dream sleep. Again, their eyes are one of the few muscles that are not paralyzed. So, with that little bit of background, and I hope through this piece that you get an appreciation for just how structured and organized sleep really is, all right, and what that may tell us about some of the functions that we do with sleep. This is not a passive time, it's a very active time. So, without further ado, the Carpe Diem String Quartet and Korine Fujiwara compose Morpheus. Thank you.